Hey everybody, this is Eve West. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. This channel is dedicated to promoting a book that I wrote. It's called Follow. It's actually an ebook. You can purchase it on Amazon.com. I thought it was $3, but they've increased the price to $3.99. I'm not exactly sure how that happened, but I'm going to readjust the price, if you will, to $3. I really just wanted to make the book affordable so everybody could really, delve into this information that I give about spirituality. My book focuses on a holistic view of spirituality, looking at it not just from a spiritual, psychological standpoint of a human being about love and intuition and creativity and things like that, but also the earthly aspect of us, which is the reptilian brain, where we can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so, my book really, tries to give a totality of who we are as humans, which are basically demigods. We're demigods. And so when we descend into the matrix, or what I call a mind and a body, when we descend into the matrix reality, or this altered reality, we're forced to neglect our earthly aspect of ourselves and to be super duper righteous and pious and, to follow rules and adhere to laws and things like that. But at the end of our incarnation, we meet the aspect of ourselves that we deny, which materializes into what we call a beast, or is allegorically depicted as Satan in the Bible. But really, Satan is just Saturn, which is the god of time and the material. And so we're not honoring ourselves in terms of time and the material. We're not given the knowledge to manifest our desires into physical reality. We acquire what we call a beast or an inner child or an id, the id in Freudian psychology. And so that aspect of us, we meet that aspect of us at the end of our incarnation, and it starts to whip us, really. And so that's when we experience, the New Age calls it awakening, but it's really, I like to refer to it in its Christian theological term, which is crucifixion. And so my book looks at, if you will, the various constructs of the matrix and how the various constructs such as media and entertainment, education, the familial structure, the government structure itself, did I mention religion, education? So all those structures, those various structures actually work to separate what I would call Adam and Eve, or your feminine right and your masculine left brain, or it's referred to as Isis and Ra, like in Egyptian mythology. It is referred to as, the conscious and the unconscious mind, and if you want to talk about technical psychological terms, but basically God and the devil. And so, it's not holy, it's not, it's actually a travesty to be forced to play one aspect of yourself and not embrace the totality of who you are within balance. And so anytime you're living in an imbalance and you're forced to be imbalanced, it accrues a lot of guilt. And the soul actually suffers, and you feel bad about yourself. And the beings that control this false reality or this matrix environment, they get a good meal, a tasty meal off of seeing us fight ourselves, and be against ourselves, because we're the end of your incarnation. You're illuminated, or illuminated, I should say. And so I say illuminated because a lot of the information that you find out toward the end of your incarnation that conflicts with your programming or conditioning really generates suffering. Like for me, one of them was, in terms of religion, I was taught Jesus, died for my sins, and, to worship Jesus and so forth. And so to find out toward the end of my incarnation that, the name Jesus, there's no power in the name Jesus, because he wouldn't have had that name. The letter J didn't come out, wasn't out by the time that Jesus was walking the earth. And so because of that, and being conditioned to believe that there's power in the name of Jesus, really caused a whole lot of suffering, if you will, within me. And so the beings who govern this false reality do not want to listen to that type of information. They don't want to hear those types of questions. Asking them why did they create these false demiurge gods, if you will. They want you to believe in the false aspects of this reality. so they can control you. And so, and because you have a pineal gland, they, basically knock the pineal gland out of balance, and illuminate you to the truth and abruptly awaken you to what reality really is for the negative loose energy that it generates. And so, really, when you look at this, we have to look at the powers that be to see that they're actually slaves themselves. We are slaves within this reality, but they themselves are slaves to actually have to do things like this to us. So, that's pretty much what Follow is about. The various contracts of the Matrix, looking at the elite. How the elite have plateaued of experiencing the material, so they've resorted to, degenerate ways of experiencing emotions, such as torturing us and sacrificing us. And focusing on the difference between the astral and the unconscious mind, or the ego, I should say, and how, like I said, the various contracts of the Matrix, how it solidifies that. And so, my last video, I talked a little bit about the Antichrist. I talked about the Antichrist, how the Antichrist is my handler on the astral realm, which is King James of Scotland, and how the various, so you can see through pop culture especially, how they've there's certain symbology that suggests that King James of Scotland is going to be brought in as the Antichrist. When you look at certain videos, like for example, the video by the Carters, Ape Shit, was a video I pointed out that really gave a whole lot of clues about the Antichrist, when she talks about, and the lyrics of her song, Give Me That Vitamin D, she's talking about Jesus the Son. She's talking about give me the vitamin D. She talks about when you see the spectrum of hues of women dancing, it refers to melanin and how melanin is connected to the third eye. And so when you are considered a Jew, or you are considered a Jew, when you have your higher concentration of melanin. And when your melanin is extracted out every incarnation until you make it around to a master race of no melanin, the more you get your melanin extracted out every incarnation, you become Jewish. You're not a Jew. And so a Jew is one who is a true Jew, if you will, is a black woman. Actually, it's a black woman that would be a Jew. I know typically we think of Jews as the people we see on TV, like Israel, what have you, but really Jews are black women. They're black people. And so, when it comes to your hue makes you human. And so it's important to know that melanin is important, and that's why at the superficial level we see black people in particular are targeted, because the Matrix environment cannot exist with the truth hanging around. The more melanin you have, the more ability you have from the pineal gland to have insight. So, when you don't have any more hue or melanin, you become what we call a dumb blonde. And, I say that in jest because, you may be smart in terms of the information disseminated from the Matrix, but as far as being your creative abilities, you do not have any creative abilities as a master race, as a race without any hue. You don't have the ability to manipulate matter. You're totally governed by an outside entity that considers itself to be God. So you have to go to God, your unconscious, the unconscious aspect of you that puppeteers your ego for everything. But when you have melanin, you have your God capabilities. And so that is why black people in particular in the Matrix are targeted and slandered, because that type of God power has to be taken away and has to be deactivated. So a monarch, the reptilian that actually owns this construct, he can play God, as opposed to you, if you will, being the God and realizing the God within yourself. So it definitely creates a slave mentality to deactivate the melanin, and to have black people in particular focus on the divine instead of the divinity that makes the divine, which goes back to the mind, which is the pineal gland. So, I talked about, ape shit, and I talked about how, and Beyonce, she's referring to the Lamb of God, It says in the book of Revelation that God slays a lamb for his pleasure. And so when she says fast like a Lambo, skeet, 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 she's talking about not a Lamborghini car. Superficially, that's what she's talking about. But she's really talking about the whore of Babylon. That's why whores are considered to be fast, if you will. And so that's what she's referring to. And when Jay-Z talks about how, Chief Keefe meets Rafiki, who been lying king to you, he's referring to King James of Scotland, and how King James of Scotland has lied to Jesus, because Jesus is actually two people. He is, Chief Keef, which is the conscious ego, and Rafiki, and you remember Rafiki from The Lion King, and so Rafiki is a monkey, basically, and so that goes to show that the spiritual has been kept away from the earthly, and whenever you do that, you create a lot of, I guess what you would call polarity between the two, and it causes you to be a saint, and it causes you to be a sinner. And so a soul should not be subjected to that type of, I guess what you would call judgment, because the saint nor the sinner is real. The ego and the unconscious astral body is artificially created by the environment, by the reality that is uploaded to the pineal gland of the consciousness. So, I really just wanted to talk about that, and, how, King James of Scotland is being brought in as the Antichrist. Talks a little bit about the, what is it called? The auditorium hall of the Pope, and how it looks like a reptile. And the reptile is seen as like eating the people, and how Jesus is coming out of this nuclear explosion, if you will. And, it just talks about, basically, how King James of Scotland is a reptile. He's a reptilian. And when I say reptilian, I don't mean like these lizard people, that the New Age perpetuates, because it's all about fear and making you afraid. But King James of Scotland is just dominated by his reptilian brain. Monarchs, heirs to the law, are all dominated by their reptilian brain. And so, when I talk about this, I talk about how, monarchs, if you will, they are just born satanics. And I know that sounds a little harsh, if you will, and judgmental, but just hear me out a little bit on this one. Monarchs are not new money, they're old money. They're old money. And so when you have money, and you have all the time to, ground your desires into physical reality, you short circuit your femininity in a way. You short circuit your feeling body, your emotions. And so, things that matter to normal people don't matter to you. So, for example, if going to Bora Bora mattered to you, like, for example, going to Bora Bora would matter to me. I think of it as like one of those exotic locations. I'm like, oh, I would love to, to travel there. But to an elite, they can go to Bora Bora whenever they want to. It's not special. And so, whenever you have so much money, you can ground your desires. Things carry for you a very low frequency. It carries a low frequency. And so whenever, you are surrounded by stuff and material, you've shopped till you dropped and have sex till you drop and tried every drug there is and this and the other, you start to develop what we call a degenerate mind. So you become a reptile. So you become a vampiric. And so when it comes to the elite, they're very vampiric. You can't really hide anything from an elite. If an elite was watching this video, they would be able to tell you more about me than I probably know about myself, just by my mannerisms and how, my facial expressions and how I move my head. And they're all about the body because, most people, they work a 9 to 5 and they have families to take care of and, stuff like that and different things to do. But elite, they don't have those responsibilities that most people do. And so they notice everything. And because they're so much into noticing everything, they're all about the body and about the physical, and living at a different brainwave frequency than normal people who are driven by their reptilian brain, by survival mode is what I call it. They're able to manipulate human beings who are, who are driven by the reptilian brain. and who are in survival mode for their own selfish needs and things like that. So, just want to kind of shed light on, on King James of Scotland and the elite and, monarchs and monarch programming in a way. I talked about Iggy Azalea's video started, and how that connects with ape shit because, Iggy Azalea's started, she says, you're getting a check. And so Beyonce, when you look at ape shit, one of the first things she says is, give me my check. And so this is, actually referencing, really Jesus, because they're trying to get rid of Jesus so they can bring in the Antichrist. And so they're actually trying to, with monarch programming and gang stalking and all these different things, different mind torture tactics, they're trying to get Jesus to leave. They're trying to get the Christ to leave, and so they can bring in the Antichrist. And so they want Jesus to sell himself out like Judas. And so you can think of Jesus as Judas, if you will. I know in the Bible, if you read it literally, you're like, Jesus is not Judas. But from a metaphysical occult standpoint, Jesus is Judas. Judas is really like the father, the astral aspect of him. And so Jesus is the pious aspect, whereas Judas is the materialistic aspect. And so they want Jesus to sell himself out for a check. And so to sell his soul, to sell his melanin, so he can actually, so they can bring in the Antichrist, which is the reptilian aspect, that does not have any more pineal gland, but just focuses on the material and grounding the material. And so, even in ape shit, not ape shit, and started by Iggy Azalea, we see that they refer to King James of Scotland because, as I told you in my last video, King James of Scotland is gay. He is gay. And so, and like I said before in my last video, I'm not really talking about so much at the physical level as I'm talking about, because he's known to be gay, liking men. But when I say he's gay, he likes reptiles. He does not like Jews. And so a Jew has both the pineal and the pituitary gland, the intersecting triangles of the masculine and the feminine. And so King James of Scotland sees this as a threat because, when you have intersecting triangles, you have God status. You have the ability, although it's deactivated, you have the ability to ground the material and you ground your desires into reality when you have the knowledge. And so instead of uniting and becoming married to a woman, which is a Jew, he would rather be married to a reptile, which is a being that only functions by the five senses, which you can see, taste, touch, smell, and hear. And so, he is, like in Started, she, Iggy Azalea talks about, I do it big, like I'm a giant. And so she's talking about King James of Scotland. He wants to be a woman. He does not want to be with a woman. And so that's why the Antichrist is oftentimes referred to as a homosexual. In fact, in Started, Iggy Azalea has a drag queen in that video. And, she talks about, when your dad makes you wake up in the morning and he makes you drag or something like that. So, I mean, this is the drag queen. That's why Satan is known as the dragon. And so when you see that there's a perversion of the masculine and the feminine energy, it's referred to as a drag queen. So this is King James of Scotland, who is a drag queen. I just, want to point that out. And, there's just so many different pop culture, I guess what you would say, references, if you will, to the Antichrist. Another one is Cardi B, actually. Money. If you listen to Cardi B's Money, it's talking about bringing the Antichrist. It's talking about Moloch, too. Talking about how people sacrifice and sell their souls, sell their children, sell Jesus, basically, into slavery so they can have some money. And so, in Cardi B's lyrics, especially when she says, Cardi B tip top, at the tip top, I think she says bitch, at the tip top bitch, kiss the ring and kick rock sis. And so when she says kick rock sis, she's talking about the feminine aspect of the soul, leaving the masculine, leaving the reptile. And so really, the purpose is to actually unite the spiritual and the masculine aspect together. So you can actually experience this reality within balance. But whenever you're a reptile, there's an imbalance there that will eventually cause you to have to reincarnate back into, come back into the reincarnation system, back into the prison system. So, um, there's even a video, I think, with Cardi B. She has an A on her shoulder. I can't remember the song, and it was the A with a circle around it, and this stands for adulterer, if you will. And so the black woman in particular is really, there's a negative picture painted of the black woman in particular, because the black woman is actually the embodiment of Jesus, if you will. She is, I guess you would call the feminine counterpart to Jesus. She would be Isis, and so Jesus, the masculine counterpart, would be Ra. And so the whole point is to actually prevent Isis and Ra from uniting. And so to have them separated by El, which is Satan, because El is the ancient Hebrew name for Saturn, which is Satan, allegorically depicted as Satan in the Bible. If you want to learn more about monarch programming and stuff like that, I really strongly suggest that you, with an open third eye, that you look at movies like Eyes Wide Shut. If you look at movies like Eyes Wide Shut, and it goes into sacred prostitution, it shows you how, when they have like that whole satanic, sex ritual, whatever the case is, where, Bill is about to be sacrificed by the elite, the monarchs and the people of high society, because he's not supposed to be at this satanic ceremony. But they're playing a song. It's very key here. They're playing a song in that ritual. It's called Backwards Priest. And so it goes to show that, especially when it comes to the Catholic Church, if you will, that, they're backwards priests. That's why you hear about them molesting the kids and stuff like that. When you listen to that song, Backwards Priest, there's chanting. And so when you hear chanting, you hear three voices. One voice is the voice of the man, which is the masculine or Ra. And then you hear the voice of the female, which is Isis. Or you could say Eve, and so Ra will be Adam in Christian theology. But then you hear a very demonic voice, and this is the voice of Satan, or El. And so the voice of Satan is actually separating the uniting of the male and the female voices. And so these are backwards priests that are actually orchestrating an environment that prevents the union of the masculine and the feminine. And so, I like to put that out there in terms of monarch programming. And what monarch programming is really designed to do is designed to pervert nature. It's designed to pervert nature and designed to keep the two separate. So demons can actually be, I guess what you would call, placed upon the psyche, the consciousness, which makes people actually reincarnate back into the reincarnation system, because guilt always brings you back here. So when you see your masculine nature in an imbalanced way, or even your feminine nature in an imbalanced way, it accrues guilt. And so that's the whole purpose of the backwards priest, or the elite that actually govern this false matrix reality. And so they, especially out of all the demiurge gods, they hate Jesus the most, because Jesus has more melanin content. So as I progress through the reincarnation system and I get to Krishna and Allah and all those other ones, the melanin will be extracted out more. And so, you can deceive a being who is, has less melanin content. But when you have more melanin content, such as Jesus, if you're playing that particular demiurge, God, if you will, at judgment, you more so have a gavel for them instead of them having a gavel for you. They can't really get much over on you. You're not really a very tasty meal at that point. Instead of being Ruth Chris with the 5-course meal, you're more like a dollar menu. They're eating off the dollar menu at the McDonald's, if you will. So they get you next time. So I wanted to point that out there and point out monarchs and the whole significance of monarch programming, what the intention is for your consciousness and separation, and so forth. So, I wanted to talk a little bit in this video, and I don't want to go too far, if you will. I don't want to make this video too long. So I may do it in another segment, if you will. But I wanted to focus on contradictions. Because like I said, this whole environment, what I call Eden, um, it's, I guess you would equate it to Eden in the Bible. Israel, El is the, Saturn, the material. So we're all, our consciousness is constantly infused with material. And so when we see the material, it creates two aspects of us: a desire that creates an astral self, and then there is an ego, if you will. So there's an ego that's the one that actually has the desire. The astral self cultivates the desire through the ego, so it can have the things that the ego desires, if you will. Does that make sense? So if my ego wants a labradoodle puppy, it will, provide a, I guess as you call it, a situation where I would see a labradoodle and I would covet and want that. So when I go to sleep at night in the astral realm, I have that labradoodle puppy. I own it on the astral realm. And so the whole purpose of getting out of the matrix system and the slave system is to actually gain that labradoodle in the physical. And so that's what they are trying to prevent. And so we see psychological splits. I talk about psychological splits throughout, most of my book. And so, like, for example, in the Matrix, the 7 deadly sins are perpetuated. So, lust is perpetuated, sex is perpetuated. We see it infused in commercials and things like that, in our music, especially hip-hop music. But we can't go to church talking about the things that we heard about in hip-hop music. We can't go to church saying, I had a gangbang last night and it was so wonderful, or something like that. That's just not acceptable. Or you can't say that at your kid's PTA meeting, and by the way, I had the best, cunnilingus or something like that, ever last night. And so, I say these things and they seem very blunt to people. And they're very much triggers for people. But, ask yourself, why are you triggered by me saying those things? Because, when you look at television, like I was looking at TV the other night, I very seldom, look at TV, but, when I was looking